You are doing the preliminary cockpit preparation. The APU is started. To better illustrate what occurs in the pneumatic system, select the ECAM bleed page using the ECAM control panel. Let's talk about the indications on the ECAM bleed page. The engine identification numbers are displayed white as if the engines were running. In fact, the FADECs are not powered, and the information that engines are not running is not provided. During preliminary cockpit preparation, all white lights must be extinguished. With the engine bleed push-button switch in the lights out position, the bleed valves are automatically controlled by the system. Observe the symbology on the ECAM. The bleed valves are cross-lined green as if they were normally fully closed with engines running. This is because the FADECs are not yet powered. The high-pressure valves are also automatically controlled by the system. For the same reasons as the bleed valves, they are displayed cross-lined green as if they were normally fully closed. The bleed temperature is displayed in green. The bleed pressure is displayed in amber because no pressure is supplied. The ground high-pressure connection indication is always displayed in white when the aircraft is on the ground and the ground speed is below 50 knots, whether the ground unit is connected or not. You also have to check that the crossbleed selector is in auto position. Observe the indication on the ECAM. The crossbleed valve is displayed cross-lined green because it is automatically closed by the system. Since the APU bleed push-button switch is selected off, the APU bleed valve is shown closed. The cross-lined green symbol indicates that. The next step during cockpit preparation is to switch the APU bleed on. Note, do not use APU bleed if ground high-pressure air is connected. Switch APU bleed on and observe the valves and indications. Observe what happened. The APU bleed valve has been opened. Air has supplied the left side of the bleed system, leading to a bleed pressure and temperature increase. The crossbleed valve has been automatically opened in order to supply air to the right side. It has been displayed amber during transit and inline green when fully open. Then, the right side received the air from APU, and bleed pressures and temperatures have increased. APU bleed is now started. On the ECAM bleed page, you can see that the APU bleed and crossbleed valves are displayed inline green, indicating they are open, and pressures are displayed in green because they are in the normal range. As you have learned in the APU chapter, the memo APU bleed is displayed on the engine warning display. Usually, APU bleed air is used for engine start. The pressure displayed on the bleed page is also indicated on the ECAM engine page, which will be explained in the engine chapter. You are ready for engine start. Let's see the start sequence. As soon as ignition start is selected, the FADECs are powered. The information that engines are not running is provided, and so engine indications and high pressure and engine bleed valves are displayed in amber. Notice that the engine identification numbers have turned white and the bleed valves have turned green. This indicates that the engines are running. The engine bleed valves remain closed because the APU bleed valve is open and the APU has priority over the engine bleed. Engines are started. You may now switch off the APU. Switch APU bleed off. Observe the ECAM. The APU bleed valve has been closed. The cross-bleed valve has been automatically closed and was displayed amber during transit. The engine bleed valves and high-pressure valves have been displayed inline green because they had been automatically opened. As soon as the bleed air supply is removed, a cool-down timer starts. We will now switch off the APU. Click on the APU master switch. The blue on light in the master switch push button extinguishes. And, after a cool-down period of approximately 2 minutes, a veil indication is no longer illuminated, and the APU bleed valve is no longer displayed on the ECAM. We will now talk about the changes that occur in the pneumatic system during takeoff. Note, normally the ECAM engine page is displayed for takeoff. For training purposes, we will display the ECAM bleed page. As engine thrust is increased, the pressure delivered from the intermediate pressure stages is sufficient, and the high-pressure valves are automatically closed accordingly. As soon as the aircraft lifts off, the ground high-pressure connection indication disappears. Remember that it is only displayed on the ground. During flight, you may need to switch on the wing anti-ice system, which uses hot bleed air from the pneumatic system. Observe the indication on the ECAM bleed page when wing anti-ice is used. Note, for further information, refer to the Ice and Rain Protection chapter. Let's now see what happens in the pneumatic system when you are back on the ground. The ground high-pressure air connection indication is displayed. With the engines at idle, the high-pressure valves are automatically opened. When the APU is started, the APU bleed valve is displayed. Just before engine shutdown, we select the APU bleed on. Observe the indications on the ECAM. Select APU bleed on. The APU bleed valve opens. The engine bleed and high-pressure valves are automatically closed because APU bleed air has priority. The cross-bleed valve automatically opens in order to let the APU supply both sides of the pneumatic system. It's now time to shut the engines down. Engines have been shut down for you. Observe that the engine identification numbers and the bleed valves turn amber because the engines are not running. As soon as the FADECs are no longer powered, the information about engines is lost. And so the bleed valves turn to green and the engine indications turn to white as if they were running. Note, the FATX will be explained in the engine modules. Before leaving the aircraft, we will shut down the APU. But first, we must switch off the APU bleed. Switch APU. Observe the indications. The cross-bleed valve is automatically closed. The APU bleed valve is closed. The bleed pressure is displayed amber because there is no pressure supplied. When the APU has shut down, after the cool-down period, the APU bleed valve is no longer displayed. This completes the normal operation of the pneumatic system. We will now discuss the indications associated with ground high-pressure air supply. If the APU is inoperative for bleed air supply, a ground high-pressure air unit can be connected to provide pneumatic pressure for engine start. The ground unit's pressure and temperature are indicated on the ECAM. Note, in this case, the cross-bleed valve opening is not automatic and must be commanded manually, contrary to an APU bleed air supply. This concludes the pneumatic normal operation module.